wife didn't read the job description before I went for the job. And also to follow those speeches, Mike, I'm sorry in advance. It's a great honour to be here to help launch Mike's book. I suppose thinking about what I was going to say on the way down, I've got quite a larger phone in my hand, and I'm really regretting I didn't have my phone because it's just a bit too big for my hand. I met Mike. I've known Mike through the years, but I spent quite a lot of time with Mike on an Arts Council panel about 5 or 6 years ago. And looking at the title and the exploration of his book, something just clicked in my head about Mike and his career that is kind of maybe not spoken about in our cultural industry enough in relation to these people that straddle the place between the academic, the professional, and the community. And I think it's very important that we kind of hold those spaces separately, but also the alchemy of what they can bring together. And I think Mike Frinton's career thus far really exemplifies the power of when those three things came together. I mean, I walked in here and he was talking to his young students about, getting microphones together and giving me a tour around the room, and yet can produce work of amazing critical endeavour, and I think that's to be applauded. So in relation to the book itself, I was struck, and I'm in this weird position of needing glasses and not needing glasses. I was struck by the language around critical themes and dramas concerned with the relationship between drama and the current socio-political context. It builds on and contributes to ongoing scholarly conversations regarding the use, benefit, challenges and opportunities for drama and theatre as a social, cultural, educational and political act. And the intention of this book is to canvass current theory and practice in drama, to provide an extended examination of how drama as a pro-social practice intersects with socio-cultural institutions, to link critical discourse and examine ways drama may contribute to a broader social justice agenda. And what an amazing, amazing paragraph, and what an amazing, amazing aspiration. And it just got me thinking around, those narratives that we hold dear across theatre and drama, those narratives that are becoming more, I suppose, challenged in the world that we're living in now, just as you're kind of saying about writers that were shunned because of certain political aspects. We're seeing it live in our world right now. I mean, I became executive director and co-director of a national theatre 8 months ago, in a time where myself and my co-director Katrina are really excited about how challenging and interrogating how can you be a national theatre when the whole idea of nation has been called into context, and what does that actually mean? And I suppose Mike's book and the themes in it kind of reflects the space of history and the space of how present tense action, which is the kind of core of all drama, becomes history in the telling, and how there's a very dangerous vacuum can appear between those two poles. Like, we look back 100 years to partition on the island and the formation of the state, and we hark back to, say, the threads and the urges that brought the Abbey, the National Theatre, into existence. We live in a country where the idea, and in fact the actuality of a national theatre existed before the state. And some might argue that the state of the National Theatre is National Theatre of, it doesn't actually exist yet. But I think that whole idea of this space of imagination and narratives is key, I think, to what this book is looking to explore. And I think, just to quote again, rather than providing a clear answer to this question, we aim to critically locate the social, political, cultural and aesthetic role of drama in institutions and a way that speaks to the purpose and implications of such work. I think the word politics is very interesting in this context. As part of the process of interviewing for the job, I kind of went back and explored the idea of not so much the act of theatre, but where the word theatre came from. And obviously it came from Greek, but theatre being a place to behold, which is kind of a really interesting word. A place to behold, and again the etymology of the word drama is like to do or to act. So the actual impulse to the action, which is a very political thing, is actually at the heart of theatre and the heart of imagination. So it's a place of action where imagination gets turned into action. and it's very where people gather. And I think we're just speaking to Emily earlier on about after I fanboyed and asked for her autograph in my book. But the actual act of gathering, I think as we emerge, and I was thinking this on the train on the way down, like as we emerge from COVID pandemic and just to get out of COVID, the world war beginning, and also, the climate crisis, but also the impulse of standing here looking at like 60 or 70 people is actually quite humbling and normal, but actually really, really exciting. To actually be able to kind of gather, and that's a political act beyond what happens at that space. So the idea of drama, even if it's in a rehearsal room or in a youth theatre or in a college, or even a lecture about it, that's a political act. It's about gathering. And in an age where information becomes more digitized, more separate, where we all feel we're more connected, but the idea of truth is kind of evaporating. So I think the exploration in this book of that kind of drama space of where it's not about truth, but it's about sharing stories. And what really struck me when I was kind of thinking and reading towards kind of saying these few words was people always talk about people having been afforded space to have their voice or have their narrative, as that's where the power is. But actually, it's not. It's having the power to listen. And I think we all talk about people acquiring voices and I have a right to speak and I have a right to speak. But actually, for me, in the role that I'm in as a national theatre, but even as a citizen in this country and one that's involved in cultural industry, we have a responsibility to listen. And I think that's where breakthroughs in politics and breakthroughs in collaboration and breakthroughs in art and all that, it's not so much about the talking or the speaking, it's actually the responsibility to listen. And I think, Mike, knowing you across the years and seeing you chair groups and looking forward to, I've read some of it, I haven't read it all, but knowing your real impetus is to listen. Chairing is a very difficult thing to do. Some people do it for hearing their own voice, but you have a really, really skill in listening. So I'm excited about as you bring these, what can be, highly academic themes to the space, but that, again, going back to the beginning, that intersection between the academic, the professional and the community, I think sits at the heart of all you do. So it's my great pleasure to be here to launch the book. Mike, thanks.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, friends and colleagues. Báilte Roibhar Fad Gotí. I'm Del Table, and it's lovely to see you all here. When I met Mark first, I was very aware of his work in Access, and I was very much in admiration of it. And Access, for those of you who aren't aware of the geography and the kind of cultural geography of Dublin City, is located in the kind of north, not quite inner city, but in an area called Ballymun, which would have been flatland, essentially, was dominated by high, what would you call them, high tower buildings, where a lot of I suppose the residents of Dublin city centre were moved out there in the 50s and 60s as part of slum clearance and so on and so forth. It developed a significant amount of social difficulties as a result of it. And I was always greatly in admiration of the work that Access did and that Mark led there in terms of Access not just being a showing place for other people's stories, but as a telling place for the stories of the people of Ballymun and the stories of the people of North Dublin. And Mark, after that, we got to work on that famous Arts Council group together, and my admiration for you only grew at that point in time. Mark is a man who likes to speak his mind, but is a man who feels deeply about the place of drama and theatre in the world, which is really why I'm here and what has driven this book. I can't go any further without Jean, my wonderful wife, is sitting here at the table with her phone out. You're probably wondering what on earth is going on. My co-author on this book is, and the brains behind it, is a woman called Kelly Freebody. Kelly is Associate Professor at the University of Sydney, and this is our third book together, believe it or not. We've been friends for the last decade. It's one of the great privileges of my life to write with her and to know her as a friend. And I'm going to get to spend some time over there in May and June. Kella's fast asleep in her bed, probably surrounded by her husband and 2 kids at this moment in time. So Gina's making a recording that we can send to her. But Kelly and I sat down over coffee one morning in Sydney, And we were talking about what our next project might be as academics do, and we came to the conclusion about two things. The cover image of the book is of someone holding up a placard which says we need a change. That was one of our convictions, that things aren't great in the world. And our second conviction was that the arts, and particularly drama and theatre, can be a force for change in the world and a force for good in the world, without overstating our hand, but that drama can be a place where we learn not just to act on stage, but where we learn to act as citizens. And we learn to become powerful individuals and powerful citizens. So this book is driven by that conviction. And what it seeks to do is very, very simply map out areas, as Marcus said, where that's enacted. So areas like the environment, areas like sexuality, like identity. David and I have long since wondered how we've ended up in the same department. He says to me sometimes, I read books and you do, like Alva and I are crunching well-being data at the moment. You're more of a social scientist, but I think it's around that piece around identity and what it means to be a human, what it means to be an Irish human, that we find kindred spirit and meaning, David. And that's very much what drives this book. So it tries to map out how drama can enact some role in all of these things, and also how all of these things can equally be changed by drama. And we quite deliberately use the phrase drama because theatre at times has connotations of buildings such as this, of a formal performative act enacted on a stage. We're really interested in what happens in streets, we're really interested in what happens in youth theatres, we're really interested in what happens in classrooms. Both of us are formerly teachers. And what happens when theatre is brought into places where it hasn't really been before, and what kind of enactment of citizenship can happen as a result of that. So this book is born very much of that conviction, and Mark, thank you. I think you captured it beautifully in terms of what you had to say, and the spirit of, I think, what's driving the book. I want to echo David's words of thanks in thanking our departmental colleagues, Fiona, Carol, David himself, Jeanette is here, Brian. I'm not going to start naming everyone, but there's loads of our colleagues and PhD students in the room, and you're all part of the ecology that nourishes and that feeds the thinking that goes on in our work, and you're deeply valuable members of our community. So thank you all for being here to celebrate with us this evening, and thank you, Bill, for answering the call and coming in to chair this evening's work. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Come and talk to you soon.
Wake up.
I want to thank all my own family, and particularly Jean. As anyone who has a partner who's an academic or a writer, they know the long hours of disappearance, where people disappear into studies and emerge for toasted sandwiches and coffees and occasional glasses of wine. So thank you for your forbearance. And my in-laws and extended family are here as well, so that gratitude is reciprocated. And those of you in the room who are artists that I get to play with and get to turn on lights for, I cherish your presence here this evening as well greatly. Thank you all very much indeed.